I never imagined that my life would take the unexpected turns that it did. If you had asked me a decade ago where I saw myself today, I would have painted a much simpler picture: a happy marriage, a comfortable home, and plans for a family. But as I look back now, I realize that life had different plans for me, plans that were challenging, painful, and ultimately transformative in ways I could never have anticipated. My name is Claire, and at the age of 35, I thought I had everything figured out. I had married my college sweetheart, Rob, a charismatic man with big aspirations. We met during our junior year. He was studying business, full of vitality and ambition, while I was focused on building my career in marketing. We immediately connected. Rob had a way of infusing life with a sense of adventure, and at that time, it was exactly what I desired. Our courtship was a whirlwind. We were that couple, constantly together, always laughing, and endlessly discussing our future. We tied the knot shortly after graduation, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. Rob landed a job at a promising tech company, and I began my marketing career at a well-established firm. We moved into a modest yet comfortable apartment, and it felt like everything was falling into place. However, after a few years, the first signs of strain started to emerge. Rob's once inspiring ambitions began to dominate not just his life, but our life together. He became consumed with the idea of launching his own company, often coming home late, engrossed in his plans and ideas. Initially, I supported him since his drive was one of the things that had drawn me to him. However, our conversations began to revolve less around us and more about the business, and his focus shifted entirely from our marriage to his dreams. I found myself waiting for him. The dinner table was set for two, but only one plate was in use. He would return home late, exhausted and distant, hardly acknowledging me before collapsing into bed. The love and excitement we had once shared seemed to fade into the background. I attempted to discuss it with him, but he always brushed it off with a promise: once the business takes off, things will get better. I wanted to believe him. I tried to convince myself that the man I had married was still there, buried beneath all the stress and ambition. However, the reality was that Rob had changed, and so had I. As the years went by, we decided to start a family, or rather, I initiated the discussion. Rob was always too busy or too stressed. Whenever I broached the topic, he would postpone it with vague assurances of soon. Meanwhile, I was getting older, and the dream of becoming a mother started to feel increasingly out of reach. We tried for a year, and then another, with no success. By the third year, I visited a doctor to ensure that everything was okay. When I suggested that Rob accompany me, he seemed irritated. "I don't have time for that," he said. "It's probably nothing anyway." However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, so I went alone. The tests were extensive, and the wait for the results was agonizing. When the results finally arrived, I was informed that everything appeared normal. There were no apparent issues with my fertility. When I shared the news with Rob, he barely reacted. "See? I told you it was fine. Maybe we need more time." But I could sense that something was weighing on him. He was distant and distracted, as if something else was on his mind. One evening, after another tense conversation about starting a family, Rob finally snapped. "Maybe it's not meant to be, Claire. Maybe we're just not destined to have kids. Besides, I've got enough on my plate right now." His words pierced me deeply. This wasn't just about children, it was about our life together, our future, and for the first time, I questioned whether we even had one. As Rob's business began to gain traction, he became more withdrawn. He worked late almost every night, frequently traveling for meetings and conferences. I hardly saw him anymore, and when I did, it felt like we were strangers living under the same roof. My attempts to rekindle our connection, to remind him of the life we had once envisioned, fell on deaf ears. He was too engrossed in his work and his success to notice what was happening to us. I recall the night when everything changed. It was a Friday, and I had prepared dinner, hoping for one of those rare evenings when Rob might return home at a reasonable hour. However, as the hours passed, the food grew cold, and my hope waned. He finally arrived around midnight, smelling of alcohol and something else that I couldn't quite place. "You're late," I said, my voice tinged with frustration. "Work," he muttered, barely glancing at me as he tossed his coat onto a chair. "You're always working, Rob. We never see each other anymore. I feel like I don't even know you." I didn't mean for it to come out so harshly, but the words spilled out before I could stop them. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm doing this for us, Claire, for our future." "What future?" I snapped. "The one where you're never home? The one where we don't have kids because you're too busy to try?" Rob's face darkened. "Don't start with this again." But I couldn't hold it in any longer. "I'm tired, Rob. Tired of waiting for you to make time for me, for us. You've changed, and I don't know how much more I can take." He didn't respond. Instead, he grabbed his coat and walked out the door, leaving me standing there in the silence of our empty apartment. I stood frozen, realizing the man I once loved so deeply was now a stranger. It was after that night that things began to unravel. Rob would stay out late, sometimes not coming home at all. I knew something was wrong but was too afraid to confront him. I didn't want to face the possibility that our marriage was crumbling, so I buried myself in work, hoping to distract myself from the growing distance between us. But then, one morning, I found the proof I had been dreading. Rob's phone, left carelessly on the kitchen counter, buzzed with a message. I shouldn't have looked, but something inside me couldn't resist. The message was from a woman named Emily, and it was clear from the tone that this wasn't just a work colleague. My heart sank as I read through their conversation. Entire flirtatious texts and late-night plans. It was all there, the confirmation that Rob had been seeing someone else. My hands shook as I put the phone down, the weight of the betrayal crashing down on me. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. After everything we had been through, this was how it ended. That evening, when Rob came home, I confronted him. I showed him the messages, and for a moment, he just stood there, speechless. But then, instead of apologizing, he tried to turn it around on me. "You've been distant too, Claire. It's not like you've made much of an effort either." His words stung, but I wouldn't let him shift the blame. "This isn't about me, Rob. This is about you. You checked out of this marriage long ago, and I've been trying to hold it together while you've been out with someone else." Rob didn't deny it. Instead, he just looked at me, defeated. Maybe this just isn't working anymore. There it was, the end. I had seen it coming, but hearing the words still felt like a punch to the gut. A few weeks later, we filed for divorce. Given everything we had been through, the process was quick, almost too easy. We split our assets, sold the apartment, and went our separate ways. I moved into a small condo on the other side of town, trying to rebuild my life while Rob dove deeper into his work. For a while, I felt lost. The life I had envisioned, marriage, kids, a happy home, had slipped through my fingers. But slowly, I began to find my footing again. I threw myself into my career, taking on new projects and challenges. I reconnected with friends, people I had drifted away from during the chaos of my marriage. And then, something unexpected happened. I met someone. His name was Adam, and he worked at a company we were partnering with on a new marketing campaign. He was kind, funny, and supportive in a way I hadn't experienced in years. At first, I was hesitant. After everything that had happened with Rob, I wasn't sure if I was ready to let someone new into my life. But Adam was patient. He didn't push or demand more than I was willing to give. We started dating, taking things slow, And for the first time in a long time, I felt happy, genuinely happy. Adam made me feel seen and valued in a way Rob never had. He supported my dreams and ambitions and didn't make me feel guilty for wanting more out of life than just being a wife. A year into our relationship, I found out I was pregnant. The news came as a shock, but a welcome one. Adam was over the moon, and together, we started planning for our future, a future that felt full of possibilities rather than the closed doors I had faced with Rob. As my pregnancy progressed, I reflected on everything that had led me to this point. The pain of my failed marriage, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it had all been necessary. In a way, it had pushed me to grow, to rediscover who I was outside of being someone's wife. And now, I was ready to step into this new chapter of my life, stronger and more confident of myself than ever before. Rob, however, didn't fare well after our divorce. His business took off, but so did the rumors. I heard through mutual friends that he had been involved in a scandal, embezzling funds from his company to cover personal debts. His business collapsed, and he lost everything. Last I heard, he had moved out of the city, trying to start over. It's strange when I think back on everything. For so long, I had held on to the idea of my life with Rob, convinced that if we just worked hard enough, we could make it work. But now, standing here, with Adam by my side and our child on the way, I realize that sometimes, things fall apart so that better things can come together. Life has a funny way of surprising you, and while the road hasn't been easy, I wouldn't change a thing. Because in the end, I found my way. And that's more than enough.